Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Melissa, and this channel is all about psychiatric drug withdrawal reactions and recovery. And it draws on my 7 years of experience in this community, as well as my own 4.5 year journey to recovery, and the probably thousands of conversations I've had to this point, both formally as a coach and informally, just over my time in this community. And the purpose of this channel is to provide hope in what often feels like a hopeless situation, and to also talk about themes and topics that come up regularly about this journey during my conversations with people. And none of it is meant to constitute medical advice. It's just drawing on these experiences. So the topic for today's video is all about emotions and the two layers, or the two main layers of emotions that I like to talk about. And before I get into it, I want to mention that I am doing coaching. So if you're interested in having a chat, I offer 30-minute calls and 60-minute calls, and you can find my direct booking link in the description of this video. So the layered experience of emotions. And so I've made some notes here that I just want to refer to. And so again, there's two layers to emotions in the withdrawal experience. And so when someone is talking about one of or multiple of the three sort of main emotions that come up in this journey, which are fear, anger, and sadness, I always ask people, what do you feel like the source of this emotion that you're talking about currently is? Does it feel like a chemical emotion or a neuro-emotion, which is what is talked about in this community? Or do you feel like it's a conscious processing of emotion? And it's interesting because if people have never been through this experience, they might not understand what that means. And so again, when I refer to the chemical experience of emotion and the three emotions I just talked about, most people that are experiencing withdrawal will say, I'm experiencing anger, I'm experiencing fear, but it feels so chemical in nature. I've even had people say, Melissa, I can feel the neurotransmitters. And again, if you've never been through withdrawal or had adverse reactions to an intense degree, then it doesn't really make sense, and it's hard to grasp this concept. And I use my own experience of like severe mental intrusive looping as an example. So when I was experiencing this in my withdrawal, both my first withdrawal from citalopram and my second withdrawal after a polydrugging and reinstatement experience, the intrusive thoughts that I was experiencing were nothing like I had ever experienced before I ever took psychiatric drugs. And I have a history of OCD tendencies and anxiety disorder. And usually the approach when you're dealing with intrusive thoughts or OCD, obsessive tendencies, is exposure and response prevention. So you expose yourself to the thought and you resist the urge to do compulsions. And if you don't have compulsions and most of what you're experiencing is mental, then you're sitting with the thoughts, you're sitting with the emotions, the panic that's coming up because of the thoughts. And this is the way through it. And this was the way through it for me before withdrawal. But after withdrawal, when I was experiencing this severe mental looping, it literally felt like my brain was overfiring. It felt like I was almost having seizure-like activity in my brain, if that makes sense. It was very, very different than what I experienced prior to taking any psychiatric drugs. So this was my own experience with that, but many people that I talk to will say, I'm experiencing rage or anger, but it feels so chemical in nature. The main one that I hear is I experience chemical fear or chemical terror. And it's a very different experience from anxiety, panic, and sort of organic feelings. And I want to address that. And again, that's a question that I ask people when they're talking about their experience of these emotions. And on the forums, they call this neuro-emotions. It's directly drug induced. And then when I ask them, are you also experiencing conscious processing of these emotions, or like, is it happening simultaneously, or is it a separate experience where now it's the chemical stuff, but maybe last week it was the conscious stuff, or are you experiencing both at the same time? This happens also with depression or sadness when someone is saying, I've experienced depression before I ever took these drugs, but now it feels chemical. It feels like this chemical depression. And so with the conscious side of the emotions, I say, so particularly with anger, and I've made videos. I just made a video not that long ago about it. It was titled something like, "You have every right to feel angry." And with anger in particular, the main things that I see, I'm just going to talk freely. I feel like it's better for me than referring to my notes. But the first one, and I would say the main one, is anger itself. So often people will say to me, when I was prescribed these drugs, I had this really loud intuitive voice or intuitive feeling saying, "You don't need this. This is not what's wrong with you." Because so often, at least in the people that I talk to, they're being prescribed these drugs for life situations. So often it's a stressful work situation, a difficult boss, a divorce or a breakup, trouble with their kids, trouble with their finances, maybe it's death of a loved one, something like that. So very much situational, very much a life experience. And then they're being told, well, you have a chemical imbalance, you need more serotonin. And their gut instinct is like, no, that's not the problem. But they're trusting the doctor, and then they're taking this drug. They take it, they either have an adverse reaction, or later on down the line, if they responded okay to the drug, they're now in this horrific withdrawal experience, neither of which they were warned about or given informed consent about. And so they're experiencing so much anger at themselves. Like, why didn't I listen to what my intuition was saying? How could I be so dumb? I knew that I didn't need to be medicated for a life experience, and yet I went along with it, and now look where I'm at. And I'm being gaslit. I'm so isolated. I feel like I'm losing everything. And so that obviously brings forth a lot of anger. And a lot of times too, the self-directed anger, people will say to me things like, "I don't know why I'm not better yet. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm so hard on myself. Like, just pull yourself together and get through this." And why, like, what is it that I'm doing wrong? What is it that I'm missing, or that I'm doing to contribute to my suffering, or that I'm not doing in order to heal from this? And there's just a lot of anger that comes up, and it's rightfully so, because again, what I just described, there's so many things that the person was thinking or feeling prior to taking the drug, and now they're blaming themselves for doing that. And another source of anger that comes up a lot is anger at the person's doctor. We live in a society where we're taught to trust the doctor. They know what's best for us. They know about health. They know about healing the body. And so we're putting full trust in them. And as someone who's had chronic disease for many years, especially for me at a young age, I learned to trust the doctor fully to take care of me. I mean, they did save my life when I had undiagnosed diabetes. And so I had complete and full trust in them. And so a lot of people will have some type of similar experience, and then they feel this incredible amount of anger towards the doctor because they're like, this was done to me. Not only were they not given informed consent, but then when they go back afterwards to say, this is what's happening to me, the doctor's like, that's not possible. Or if you do have withdrawal, it lasts 4 weeks, the drug is out of your system, you should be fine. There's something else wrong with you. You need a psychiatrist. So there's a lot of anger, rightfully so, again, that comes with that type of dialogue and experience. And then there's so many other pieces or potential pieces to this as well. Anger at big pharma, even anger at family and friends sometimes, especially if the person was encouraged to listen to their doctor, encouraged to just try this drug. And, sometimes they're being told, if you have a bad experience or you develop side effects, you just stop and then the side effects go away. And that doesn't happen for a lot of people. So again, anger at family and friends, maybe if they were encouraged that the drug would be fine, that they just needed to listen and be compliant. And now they're feeling a lot of anger about that. And then even anger at God. That's something that I really experienced a lot of and still do to some degree to this day. Another source of anger that comes up in conversations is just towards strangers and society. And people will share with me, and this is something I also experienced, was someone is maybe people watching or even watching characters on a TV show, and the person is feeling an incredible amount of anger watching these people. Like, why are they able to live a normal life? And I did everything right. I lived a healthy life. I stayed away from things that I know were bad for me or are bad for me, and I still got suckered. That's how it feels. And they look towards these other people, and like I said, even characters on TV shows, and they're like, why me? Why is that person able to live their life normally and I'm sitting here in suffering that I was never warned about, never told could happen? And it's so incredibly unfair. And that brings up a lot of anger in people. And for myself, it was like projection. So I would watch a YouTube video that was unrelated to withdrawal, and my mind would always be going to, what is that person thinking about? Are they able to process thoughts normally? Or do they have intrusive looping? Are they thinking about something else while they're talking into the camera? Are they having intrusive thoughts? Are they having this out of body experience? Like, are they in withdrawal? Do they take psych drugs? I mean, it was always this type of like projecting my experience onto other people, even on a screen. When it comes to fear, so many people experience what they call chemical terror, and it's usually the most intense in the mornings. This isn't always the case, but very often this is when people experience the worst of it. It feels people like nothing the person has experienced before. It's not attached to any type of thought process. It's just there the moment the person opens their eyes, and they just have no conscious control of this. And so it's something that's very difficult for people to experience. But also there's what I call second fear, and I've referred to that many times in videos, where you're already experiencing this chemical fear, this chemical terror, and then knowing and reading everything that you've seen online about withdrawal and adverse reactions tends to be quite horrific. So there's a lot of horror stories on the forums. There's a lot of horror stories in the comments on YouTube. And again, like, everybody deserves a space to share their experience, but also there's, so often someone who's experiencing these intense chemical emotional symptoms are then searching, and then they're adding more fear to an already scary situation by reading and being exposed to these horror stories and other people's comments and their own experiences. So there's that. And then same with the depression and the sadness and the hopelessness feeling. There's two layers to that. The feeling of despair or hopelessness because of the longevity of this, and because what I refer to as battle fatigue. People get so tired the longer that this goes on. Even if they're clearly getting better, it's so hard to quantify the healing, and also you tend to lose perspective as you get further along in this journey and you get more tired, and the sort of resources that you can pull from to keep going get diminished because just of the length of time. And most people too will say, I'm feeling better, or the people who have healed will say, I'm so grateful that I feel better, but it took longer than I would have ever thought or wished for. So there's that. And so there's that despair, that hopelessness, like, why aren't I better yet? And how much longer is this going to go? And what if there's something else going on? Or what if I become one of the people who experiences this really for a really, really long time? So all of those things are going through the person's mind. I mean, it's such an overwhelming experience emotionally and in every other way. So let me know your thoughts on this. Like, there's a lot of things that kind of get uncovered and unraveled in those conversations. And it's something that needs to be processed and needs to be exposed and talked about, because again, we have such a unique and isolating experience that not a lot of people can relate to, especially in our real lives and especially in, our medical community. So that's why we seek out this community online, because we are all experiencing something similar that not a lot of people can understand or relate to. And so this is what brings us together. And it's really important again. And I've made videos about how this is similar to the grieving process, and how there's so much sense of loss in this. And so that's a process as well. I mean, it's so unfair, and it still makes me so angry, that this is happening to people without any foreknowledge at all, or any warning, or any even verbalizing at all that any of this can happen. So it's hard even now to think about and to watch people experience. And I definitely had that experience myself. So let me know your thoughts on this in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.